Recovering confidence, removing limiting beliefs. What is a belief? A belief is a statement about reality that feels true on some level, and we think our beliefs are accurate statements about reality. Marty Lefko. Living a life of fulfillment and joy. Conditional self-worth. We all want to have fulfillment and joy in our life, and more often than not, most of us feel pressure to live up to a standard of success that keeps us in the hamster wheel of trying to be successful on others' terms. This happens to all of us because we have a conditional self-worth. If we feel our worth is conditioned on achieving a set of goals or expectations, we feel driven to fulfill them even when those actions really don't satisfy our deepest desires. We're going to start with mistakes and failures are bad, which is the first limiting belief of 19, and we will eliminate them in the order that is recommended. So belief number 1, mistakes and failures are bad. Do you usually act as if you believed that your mistakes and failures are bad? You would need to answer out loud, even if it's a simple yes or no. When you make a mistake or fail, do you experience it as a learning opportunity, or do you beat yourself up about it? Answer yes or no. Do you feel uncomfortable when you make a mistake? Answer out loud, please. Now I want you to say the following out loud. Mistakes and failures are bad. Okay, so now we're going to do a little check-in. You may disagree intellectually with the statement that mistakes and failures are bad. Doesn't it feel true on some gut level, though? You either have a belief or you don't. There is no sort of belief, just like a woman can't be sort of pregnant. If you have answered yes to any of these questions, you have the limiting belief that mistakes and failures are bad. If you don't eliminate this limiting belief, then you are likely to do things, or you're likely not to do things that might cause you to make a mistake, which means you won't do things that would expand you or enhance your life. It could keep you from speaking up when there is something you have to say. This belief could be a significant barrier to you getting what you want out of life. Can you think of other ways that this limiting belief affects you? Maybe you might have to pause this and just think about this for a minute or two. Okay, so now we're going to say this out loud one more time. Mistakes and failures are bad. So even though most people have this belief, if you're absolutely certain that you don't have this belief, we will proceed to the next belief. However, we're going to go ahead and eliminate this one as if you do have this belief that mistakes and failures are bad. Say it one more time out loud. Mistakes and failures are bad. Let's figure out when you formed this belief. Most limiting beliefs were formed when we were young children. A belief doesn't come from a single incident, but from many similar events. When it's a broad belief like mistakes and failures are bad, or the next limiting belief that we'll cover in a separate video, I am not good enough, it's most always formed by our experiences that we've had with our parents. And we're not blaming our parents at all. Likely they did the best that they could. Most parents love their children and don't know that their young kids were prone to forming these kinds of beliefs as they grow up. Most parents don't even realize that the negative impact of their words and behavior on their children, which is why most of us develop these negative limiting beliefs. There is a constant conflict between what our parents want and what we children do. Parents usually want their kids to be quiet, yet most of us as kids are not quiet. Parents want their kids to be neat, but most kids don't even understand the concept of being neat. Parents want their kids to do what they're told, yet most kids want to do what they want to do. When kids don't do what parents want them to do, the parents' reactions range between mild annoyance or sometimes to the extreme anger or punishment. Now let's take a look at your earlier life and let's see if we can detect where the belief mistakes and failures are bad come from. For some people, finding the source of where the limiting belief comes from can be difficult. Here are some questions that will help jog your memory. And this is particularly for parents who actually had a clear disapproval or annoyance. So here are some questions to help jog your memory. If a parent said, "How many times do I have to tell you to take your shoes off before you enter the house?" Or, "When are you ever going to learn that you have to wash your hands before we sit down at the dinner table?" Or, "Can't you ever do things right? You're making these mistakes every single time. Hey, look at your siblings. They do it, but when are you going to learn?" Now, when you have parents' reactions that are subtle, primarily because they're nice or kind, it might be harder to detect their disapproval. So we're going to focus on how you felt when you let them down. You might not even remember what you were doing or didn't do that got your parents upset, but focus on how they reacted when they didn't like your behavior, or when you didn't do what they wanted, when they wanted it to be done, or where they wanted it to be done. And it's okay if you only have one memory or 100 experiences that come to mind. The most important thing is that you know that no one event led to this belief. In most cases, a belief is formed by many similar experiences. So whether it was an obvious or subtle, it is almost always there. Even if you can't remember specific events, the process will still work if you have the sense that the similar events occurred when you were a child and you could visualize the way your parents would have looked like or sounded as they were responding to you. Remember, we're not aiming to make your parents wrong. Even if you had a wonderful childhood and had great parents, very few of them would have been able to keep from getting annoyed at your young childhood behavior. Even if you can't remember your childhood, don't worry. You don't have to remember specific events. As long as you can remember one or both parents' annoyances or anger at you or your specific behavior when you didn't do what they wanted you to do or how they wanted it to be done and when they wanted it to be done. So here's another way to find the source of belief. Recall your relationship with your parents as you are now, or even a bit older from childhood. So this could be like elementary school, junior high, or even high school, or even present day. How did they react when you didn't do what they wanted, or didn't do the thing that they wanted you to do, or how did they deal with another sibling's misbehavior? When you look at the response you received from your parents, does it support your belief that mistakes and failures are bad? If so, then you found the source of your belief. I don't mean that you were consciously thinking this at the time. Most of the time, when we conclude something, we don't say it out loud or even internally. This is why I'm asking you to repeat things and say things out loud, because it's, inside our minds, just in this little loop. And when we say it loud, it kind of breaks the channel and allows us to investigate it as an object of senses. So we can see, oh, this is what we've been thinking and holding on to. But often in hindsight, we did in fact conclude something about what was happening. So here it says pause for memories to bubble up. So you might want to pause this and just think about a time when you didn't do something that your parents wanted you to do and what they said to you and what they look like and what their posture looked like, what tone they had with you, and how you felt. And pause this so that you can kind of drum up some memories. As memories bubble up as to your parents' annoyance at you not doing something the way they wanted or when they wanted you, can now have something that led you to the belief that mistakes and failures are bad. Now, I want you to share any events or type of situations that anyone who might have been there would have seen. For example, I want you to write down, my mom or dad used to do this X. I put X in there at me when I made a mistake. Or mom or dad frequently got annoyed at me when I did something else for not exactly doing something the way she or he wanted me to do it. Can you see that the conclusion you reached, mistakes and failures are bad, is a valid interpretation of those events? And I have here say out loud. What I want you to think about is the times that your parents were annoyed with you because you didn't do something and what they said. And as a little person whose survival is dependent on these caretakers' happiness, our attachment to our parents, our desire to feel safe and loved and accepted. You know, when we were young and impressionable and we annoyed our parents, this is when these limiting beliefs are adopted. Would you say that many children the same age as you, with the same experience as you, and that means same kind of culture, same kind of religion, same kind of upbringing, would they have formed the same conclusions that you did? Please answer out loud. Now, I know we talked a little bit about this, but we're going to do another exercise because when we think about how other people might have seen this and how they might have interpreted your parents' reaction to your behavior, you will see how easy, you'll see that that's not what, how you interpreted it is not the only way that it could have been interpreted. So I'm going to stop right now and we're going to ask some questions. Okay, welcome back. So before we begin this part of the exercise, I want to make sure that you have an event that you recalled and you wrote down. I remember when my mom did this or when my dad said this, because I want you to have that in your mind. So if you don't have that written down, please just pause the video right now and do that before you come back. Okay. Okay, so welcome back. So you have your event that you wrote down. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to be reading off a list of questions that I've typed up. And I'm going to ask you these questions. I'm going to pause for you to answer out loud. So whenever you hear me answering, or excuse me, whenever you hear me asking a question, just answer it out loud as if you were in the session with me, okay? It's really important that you answer out loud. This might seem a little redundant, but what happens is when we lay down the tracks of a belief and they're laid down like, 25, 27 years ago, they're dialed in and they have deep ruts. They're really entrenched. So what we're doing is we're like digging for gold and we're just like basically digging out those tracks and we're going to eliminate them. And so we're attacking it on all levels. And I'm hoping you bear with me because this is one of 19. Now, the more time we spend foundationally with belief number one, the other ones go, in my opinion, a lot smoother. So, are you ready to begin? If you are, let's continue, okay? So here we go. So now that you have your event written down, we're going to play a possibilities game. And we're going to imagine that you have friends, you have 4 friends that are visiting you, and they're looking at the videotape of the event that you have just written down. Now, your interpretations of those events when you were a child was mistakes and failures are bad, right? That's belief number 1. Okay. So that is the one valid interpretation of your mom and dad's behavior. And this interpretation was not wrong, but there are other reasonable interpretations of the same childhood event that you just didn't think of as a child. Because remember, most of these beliefs are created when we're like 2, 3, 4. So we're super young and we don't have the analytical prowess and critical thinking skills that we do today, even though analytically we can make a mistake and we can analyze that it's a good thing that we made a mistake because we can learn from it, but we still have that effort. We still have that belief that's deeply rooted that we want to excavate. Okay. Okay. So let's ask each of your friends for their own interpretation. Can you see that one of your friends might well say, your mom and dad thought mistakes and failures were bad, just like a lot of other people, but they could be wrong. I can think of a lot of scientific breakthroughs like penicillin that have come about due to multiple mistakes. Your mom and dad thought mistakes and failures are bad, but that doesn't make it true. So that's one friend's opinion. Another friend might say, your mom and dad were mad or annoyed because you just didn't do what they had asked you to do. Isn't this an interpretation? Isn't this interpretation as good or better than the interpretation that you came up with? Then you can answer yes or no. A third possible interpretation could be mistakes and failures were considered bad in your family, but that doesn't mean they'd be considered bad in all families. They weren't in Thomas Edison's family. We know that Edison tried 1,000 different filaments of light bulbs that didn't work until he finally found the one that did work. When he was asked about this, he said that he had not failed. He just found 999 ways that did not work. So quite obviously, he considered that the 999th attempt were valuable learning experiences. The trial and error in all his inventions proved that. Couldn't this interpretation explain those events in your childhood just as well as your own interpretation that mistakes and failures are bad? Yes or no? You say your childhood interactions with your parents could have lots of meanings. Here's what your fourth friend suggests. Your mom and dad's annoyance wasn't a response to your mistakes and failures. They were just too insecure to let you learn from your own mistakes. Perhaps your parents had unreasonable expectations for a child your age. And don't forget that not achieving something means that you are a failure. Michael Jordan turned out to be one of the greatest basketball players ever. He was cut from his varsity basketball team when he was a sophomore in high school. Was Michael Jordan a failure? Not achieving something is not an automatic failure. It's a part of the learning process. Couldn't any one of these interpretations explain those events in your childhood as well as your own interpretations? Yes or no? Of course they can. If you accept that mistakes and failures are bad, is it not a fact? It's not the, I'm sorry, it is not a fact. It's not the whole truth and nothing but the truth. It's just one possible truth. It is merely one interpretation of many possible interpretations of earlier events. I'm going to repeat the question and please be sure to answer it out loud. Does mistakes and failure are bad now seem like it's not the whole truth, but just a truth? Yes or no? In other words, do you get that this is just a belief, that this is just one interpretation of many possible interpretations? Yes or no? Review the responses of the other possible interpretations. Do you see that there is at least 4 different ways this could be interpreted? Those are the ones that we just talked about with your friends, right? Yes or no? Imagine seeing what you saw then and hearing what you heard then. And remember, we're looking at we're looking from the viewpoint of a 3-year-old or 4-year-old or 5-year-old, right? So take a few moments and really imagine events in your childhood that led you to the formation of the belief that mistakes and failures are bad. Didn't it seem when you were a child as if you could actually see that your mistakes and failures are bad in those early events with your parents? You can answer out loud. Here's why we think we can actually see our beliefs. What happened is that you looked at events that could have many different meanings and you chose one. Mistakes and failures are bad. By attributing that specific meaning to the events, each time you saw your mom or dad or both their behavior, it was if you could see that meaning in their behavior, but you didn't discover the meaning in the events, you assigned the meaning to the events. It had no meaning before you decided to give it a meaning. If you were to imagine a lemon, and I forgot to bring a lemon, but imagine it, close your eyes and imagine a lemon. Okay, do you see a lemon? Would you be able to imagine a lemon without seeing its vibrant yellow color? No, right? The color is inseparable with the actual object. You cannot see one without seeing the other. Even imagining the lemon will cause you to see the color yellow. It's the same when you assign a meaning to an event. Once you assign a meaning to an event, seeing the event is the same as seeing its meaning for you. So right now, imagine being a little kid and seeing your mom and dad's behavior and hearing their words and tone of voice. As you imagine, like you're like 3 years old, doesn't it seem as if you can see mistakes and failures are bad? Answer out loud, please. It does, doesn't it? What did you really see in the behavior mistakes and failures are bad? Before you answer, here is what I mean about seeing something. You can see the computer or the cell phone that you are using right now, right? So what color is it? What shape is it? And where is it located? Isn't it true that anything that you can see can be described by shape, color, location? You answered yes out loud, right? Well, what did mistakes and failures are bad look like when you were a child? What color was it? What shape was it? Where was it located? Did you ever really see mistakes and failures are bad? I mean, I know that you saw your mom and dad's behavior when they were annoyed or disappointed with you and you heard them criticize you. Anyone could have seen that. But remember how you just realized that what you saw could have many different meanings in addition to the meaning you gave that event, that mistakes and failures are bad. You might respond by saying that my mom and dad said that mistakes and failures were bad, but you never heard that it was true. So, one interpretation of their statement is that they are right. Another interpretation is that they are wrong. It's clear that anything that you see, like a person or object, can be described. So, if you cannot physically describe what mistakes and failures are bad looks like, it's clear now that you never really saw mistakes and failure are bad. Please answer out loud. Now, if you really never saw mistakes and failures are bad, then what did you see? Imagine being a little kid again and tell me what you are seeing right now. You can write this down or you can say it to me out loud. I'm just going to pause for a minute. So I'll ask the question again. Imagine that you were a kid. Tell me what you saw. Now, if you really never saw mistakes and failures are bad, then what did you see? Imagine being a little kid again and tell me what you are seeing right now. Is it clear that all you really saw was the reaction of one or both of your parents when you did something? In other words, all that you really saw was a series of events, right? You can say yes or no out loud. What happened was that you looked at a series of events. It could have been interpreted in many different ways. You gave the event one meaning, which was mistakes and failures are bad, by assigning that specific meaning to the events each time you saw mom and dad's behavior. It's as if you could see that meaning in that behavior, but you didn't discover the meaning in the events. You instead attributed the meaning to the events. Can you get that? They had no meaning until you gave them one? Please answer out loud. Here is an important distinction between consequences and meaning. There were clearly consequences to your parents' behavior. You got yelled at or punished, or your parents didn't talk to you. That was an unpleasant consequence. But was there any meaning to their behavior? So let me explain what I mean by meaning before you give me an answer. Say you're in a room and someone that you know doesn't come to speak to you. What might you automatically think? So please answer this question out loud. For example, you might have just told me that they are mad at me, or they are being rude, or they have something on their mind and they didn't notice me. But notice, however, what you just said is the meaning you gave to the event. And where did that meaning that you just gave the event come from? You can answer out loud. That's right. I feel like you said it came from my mind, and you're right. So, if meanings come from your mind, is there any meaning inherent in your parents' behavior? Yes or no? Or in any other event for that matter? Please answer out loud. And of course, the answer is no. So, it's not that what happened to you didn't matter, it just had no meaning. Is it real now that the events just had no meaning until you attributed one to them? Please answer out loud. If it felt that your parents made you feel that this belief was true versus seeing it, then here is another way to look at it. The events could not have made you feel bad because you know that the event has no meaning, and meaningless events cannot make you feel bad. But here's an analogy. Let's say you're sitting in a room reading a book or watching TV and you have no plans to go out. And you look outside and it starts raining. What do you feel about the rain? Answer out loud, please. You probably feel that there's nothing going on. The rain is not causing you to feel anything. So, how about you imagine there's your farmer and your crops have been starving for water for weeks, and then it just started raining. Now, how does the rain make you feel? It seems as though the rain makes you feel good, right? Now, let's imagine that you are about to get married and you're having an outdoor wedding and it begins to rain. Everyone is getting soaked. How does the rain make you feel now? You can answer out loud. It seems as though the rain makes you feel bad, but is it the rain that is making you feel good or bad, or is it the meaning you're giving it? The rain itself does not have any meaning. At one event, you feel good, and at another, you feel bad, right? So, if your mom and dad's behavior had no meaning, it could not have made you feel mistakes and failures are bad. And this leads us to a very interesting question. What did make you feel mistakes and failures are bad? I'm just pausing in case so that you can answer, not in case. I want you to answer. This is an interactive dialogue, even though I can't hear what you're saying, and I'm guessing that you're saying these things. So if you don't know the answer to this question, I will tell you. You felt bad because that's the only meaning you had already given to your parents' behavior. All you know for sure is what actually happened. Your mom and dad sounded angry or annoyed and punished you when you didn't do what they wanted you to do when they wanted you to do it. Imagine me as your coach, and I had been with you when you were a little kid, say when you were 3 years old, and had shown you the alternative interpretation of your parents' behavior. And after that conversation, you and I, well, we concluded that your parents have unreasonable expectations of you, and that's why they got annoyed. And it has nothing to do with whether mistakes and failures are bad or not. So now imagine being that little kid and have this conversation that your mom or dad get annoyed at something you did or didn't do. Notice how it is to be a child who is thinking, these folks have unrealistic expectations of me, and that's why they are annoyed, and not because mistakes and failures are bad. Wouldn't that be cool if we could think that as little 3-year-olds or 2-year-olds? Now, as you imagine the scene while giving it this other meaning, does it still feel as if your parents' behavior and comments are making you feel that mistakes and failures are bad? Did you say probably not? Bingo. So mom and dad's behavior never made you feel that mistakes and failures are bad. That feeling came from your interpretation of their behavior. Since your feelings were not caused by events in reality, they were only the results of the meaning you assigned to them. In order to explain the events, is it real that your feelings tell you nothing about mistakes and failures are bad? Okay, so let's take a deep breath and let it out slowly. Please say out loud, mistakes and failures are bad. Is it the truth? Does it still feel like the truth? Please answer out loud. The belief doesn't have to make logical sense. I'm asking you to look at the statement in the same way you did when you started working on this belief with me. Does it still seem like mistakes and failures are bad? Is it the truth? Does it still feel like the truth? I want you to answer out loud. How about this one? Do the words feel flat now? Yes or no? We form beliefs to give meanings to events that have no real meaning. Having done that, we think we have observed the meaning in the event out there in the world. It becomes a fact for us. Once we realize the events had no real meaning, that the meaning was only in our mind, that it was never a fact, and that the feeling we had was caused by the meaningless events, the belief disappears forever. So let's take another deep breath and exhale, and then say out loud that mistakes and failures are bad. Okay, so inhale and exhale. Now repeat. Mistakes and failures are bad. Doesn't it feel very different when you say these words now than when you said them at the beginning of this exercise? Is there any sense of believing that statement at all? Unless the belief is 100% gone, which means the words have no meaning for you, then you would probably still have the belief. So remember what we talked about earlier. You can't sort of have a belief, like a woman cannot sort of be pregnant. So the way to know if a belief has been completely eliminated is not to look at your feelings or thoughts in the past when you did have that belief, or even try to guess how you feel in the future. When you say the words and beliefs now, mistakes and failures are bad, do they still feel true like they did when you first started this exercise? Or do they sound meaningless? If there is no emotional resonance when you say the words, then the belief is gone. And it might be difficult to accept that a belief that you have lived with for many years has been eliminated in about what, 30 minutes? But if there is still some resonance with that belief that mistakes and failures are bad, then you still have the belief, which means that you just have to review this part of the exercise until you repeat those words and they feel flat. So once it's clear that you never saw mistakes and failures as bad, the belief will be totally gone. Okay, so I want to congratulate you, especially because this was the first one, and a lot of us feel like analytically, intellectually, we know that mistakes are good learning lessons. We look for the lessons. You know, we've seen enough as adults. We've seen, you know, we've read things and heard things that have helped shape our mind, but we've never ferreted out and took off the bad tracks and laid in some new ones. And that's why I had you dialoguing with me. So I want you to know that we have 18 more beliefs to go. And the next one is I'm not good enough. And that's the next belief that we will go over. And this is the one I really am excited about doing, because that's the one that makes a person believe that they need approval from others to feel that they're accepted or good enough. And this is the one where the inner critic, you know, that lives in our head is always kind of talking really loud and trying to make us do things or say things or behave a certain way. Well, once we handle this one, that inner critic feels safe enough to be neutralized. So when we neutralize the inner critic in our mind, and we're getting one step closer to being able to, guess what, openly disagree with others. And that only takes a few minutes. And that's a big one for me. That was a big one for me, because I always wanted to play it safe and I never wanted to offend anybody. And I kept my opinions to myself. And I love that I can openly go, just a second. Yeah, I'm going to play devil's advocate. You know, that is such an empowering belief to dissolve. So I am excited for our next time. Please let me know if you have any questions, and I really hope that you enjoyed this exercise. Mwah. See you next time. Bye-bye.